everyone. Welcome to the third part of our series, Biological Invasions in Southern Africa, a problem we can solve together. And our speaker in this part is Diana Cala. Diana Cala is a passionate advocate for sustainability, conservation, and environmental education. She will talk to us about ornamental industry. Diana Cala, the stage is yours.
Diana, my name is Diana. I worked with the Botswana University of Agriculture and Natural Resources in Gaborone, and I did my PhD there. Actually, one of my supervisors is John, the person who talked, the professor who talked first. And we were looking at the role of the ornamental sector in plant invasions in Southern Africa, mostly focusing on Botswana, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. Richard, Prof, please, if someone has a question, you can actually interrupt me. And if you don't understand my English, because I have this like funny accent, just you can just like tell me to repeat. No problem. Yeah? Okay. So, and again, this is very interactive. So I'm gonna ask a few questions, and you guys just guess. You just like say whatever it comes up first. So I would like you to guess. And whoever wants to say, you can just like shout. What percentage of invasive plants do you guess are being traded within the ornamental sector of Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Namibia? Again, guess, percentage. Shout.
Which one? Say again, how much percent?
What percentage of invasive plants do you think are being traded, are on sale within the ornamental sector, you know, the nurseries of Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Namibia? Okay, just wild, just guess, no problem.
Okay. So I want to rephrase the question for them.
Okay.
You are in what percentage of the ornamental plants that are traded in Botswana?
Yes.
You want to know the percentage within that, which
like let's say, like, just imagine like a wild guess. How many plants in percentage? Like, I don't know, 20% or 5% or 10% of the plants on sale are invasive. So it's just a question, just a wild guess, and I will tell you according to my research.
So what she's saying is, what percentage of all the ornamental plants that are sold in Botswana are invasive? What do you think? What do you think is the proportion of the invasive plants in that?
Exactly.
60%. So we have 60%. Two people simultaneously said 60.
60%. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's then go to what I've learned with my research. So I surveyed 11 major nurseries, 3 in Bots, 6 in Zimbabwe, and 2 in Namibia. I found around 1,211 species on sale. And from that number, 22%, a fifth, 289 plants have established alien populations across Southern Africa. So I don't know if you remember what the video talked about, the video that John shared and what John shared. So there are phases to invasion biology. There is the phase of introduction, there is the phase of establishment, which is when the species are able to self-reproduce and maintain self-sustainable populations. So I'm telling you that from the 1,000-something plants I've surveyed in 11 major nurseries in Southern Africa, in the 3 countries of Southern Africa, a fifth, 22% of them, 200, almost 300 plants, are alien and are considered established in any of the countries of Southern Africa. And then from that percentage, 82 plants are invasive. So actually you were like overboard, like 60%. It's not that much, really. It's just 7% of the plants I surveyed. Again, this is based on the effort I made with 11 major nurseries in the 3 countries. like around 7% are considered invasive, according to a global register of introduced and invasive species, which is a global database where experts from the different countries categorize alien plants depending on their status, whether they are introduced only or they are considered invasive already. So yes, and that picks up from what John and Julie were talking before. So yeah, again, so there are again 289 species right now on sale in these 3 countries that have established alien populations in Southern Africa. So let's keep that in mind. And then, so that number, 289, right? 82% of those plants have a very wide native range. What I mean by that, I mean that these plants, their native range is like both along the latitudinal and longitudinal gradients. Their native range is wide, it's very wide. For example, we are talking about many plants coming from the Americas, whose native range is covered from Northern America to Southern America. So, and then many plants coming from actually other parts of Africa and even the islands like Madagascar and all of that. And a bunch of them also coming from Asia, temperate and tropical Asia. Again, we are talking about wide ranges covering wide latitudinal and longitudinal gradients of space. So then that means that these plants are able to tolerate and survive in different climate conditions. So again, they can grow everywhere. That would be like a simple way to put it. And then also, many of these plants have long residence times. So this is a concept that John actually mentioned a bit in the first talk. Long residence times means that these species were introduced a long time ago. I'm talking about 200, 100 years ago, meaning that these species, specifically plants, have had a fairly long time to kind of like acclimate, adapt, and be able to expand and colonize new territories in this new region where it's being introduced. So these are 2 factors that were mentioned maybe in one of the slides in the previous talks that are actually related to the capacity of some of these species to become invasive. So these are these are interesting things about how people relate and recognize plants. So just to clarify, this is agave. This is a species of agave. I think it's agave americana or angustifolia. I'm not sure. But this is not aloe. But again, it's very similar to aloe. And actually, it's an evolutionary thing, because aloes, Southern Africa and parts of Mexico, Northern America, Central America are quite similar, are desert savanna-like type of ecosystems. So agaves have agaves and aloes have kind of like converged into similar features in order to cope with these arid ecosystems. So, the fact that they are succulent, that they usually have these spikes and all of that. So they are quite similar. And it also happens with cacti and your native euphorbias. Another question that I asked in order for me to for us, the team, to understand the role of the ornamental sector in plant invasions in these 3 countries and Southern Africa, we were asking how does the sector work, right? Because we need to understand how the sector works and how its operation relates to alien plants, right? In order to kind of tackle the driver, right? So I'm gonna kind of generalize. There are many nuances to this, but I'm gonna try to generalize and kind of characterize the sector in 4 main themes. Yes. So first, I found out that the supply chain for the sector is quite transboundary. For example, let's put the example of Botswana. Botswana, many of the plants are actually imported from South Africa. Many businesses import landscapers and ornament or like nurseries, like formal nurseries. They import plants from South Africa. And, the imports can go even up to DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, coming from South Africa. So it's quite transboundary, and it's also very heterogeneous. There are many types of businesses involved. In Botswana, backyard nurseries. Do you know backyard nurseries? I'm sure you do. The ladies that sell plants on the road and in their houses. You know that?
Yes.
Then there are also like franchises, South African franchises, Malanceus, Balstroff, and formal nurses in Zimbabwe, in Namibia. So it's quite heterogeneous in terms of the type of businesses, the size of the businesses. And actually, the supply chain kind of like reflects geopolitical relations between the countries. And I'm talking about power balances between the countries. You know that in any region of the world, there's always one country that is the toughest, the most powerful. So in this case, the ornamental industry reflects the fact that, for example, South Africa is the most powerful geopolitically and economically speaking, is the most powerful country in the SADC region, in the Southern African region. Maybe you don't agree with me, but this is like, you can disagree if you want. Then another thing that is very important is the informality. The informal sector of the economy within the ornamental sector is very significant. There are many people in the informal side of the economy selling plants along the road, in their houses. And from the formal sector perspective, it's quite contested. So, for example, and again, I'm going to put the example of Botswana. In Botswana, you see the backyard nurseries. Some of these businesses they do have license, but some others don't. And then from the formal sector perspective, some people actually question the fact that some of these informal businesses are not actually paying taxes or water bills or the rent and stuff like that. So it's quite contested in that way. And the same happens in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe and Namibia, actually, the conflicts are even more noticeable. Now, one thing that is very interesting, well, and it's a fact, actually, it's a historical fact, and then I'm going to talk about then later on, is that the formal sector is shared by white minorities and Black majorities. But then the informal sector is mostly made of Black majorities, Black, brown majorities. So this is something that we have to consider when it comes to managing plant invasions. And I'm going to talk about that later on. Then another characteristic of the sector is that the preferences and the operation of the sector itself is actually influenced by colonial legacies. And when I'm talking about colonial legacies, we can think of, for example, that many of these species that are now considered invasive within, and yet they are ornamental, they were introduced through the colonial administration 100, 200 years ago. So this is one thing. Other things are like the preferences, the way people do their gardens is actually very much influenced by colonial legacies as well. Then the consumer culture as well. I mean, we are living in this, the hegemonic way of living is like consumeristic. So this is also happening in the ornamental sector. For example, I have an example from Zimbabwe. I was talking with this nursery owner, and he was telling me that so now there's a trend, well, now 2022, 2023, there's a trend in Zimbabwe. People who can afford, they like to have plants in their bathrooms. And, bathrooms are not a very good, maybe, place to put plants because it's always like humid, there's no sun coming through. So then the plants die. And then what he was saying is that usually then people go and buy again and again and again. Every time the plant dies, they buy again. And this is a phenomenon of like consumption. And he was like, I mean, it's good to me because it's business, but at the same time, it's like, we are killing these plants, because people just have it as a good to have, right? And again, it's also a thing of status sometimes, gardening preferences and all that. And then the fourth thing is that plants in general, again, there are some nuances, but in general, plants have to be versatile, pretty, of course, because it's ornamental, and fast growing. So an example from Botswana, do you know Duranta?
So they know Duranta?
Duranta?
Yes.
Yes, right? So that one is used like, that's it's like the icon of landscaping and gardening nowadays in Botswana. Every single mall in Gaborone and probably Francistown and Palape has Duranta, because Duranta is actually pretty versatile. Like, you can do many shapes. It's quite pretty. It grows fast, and it has long blossoms. Like, the flowers and the contrast between the flowers and the leaves is just beautiful. Duranta is from my side of the world, from the Americas, and is actually considered invasive in South Africa. And in Botswana, based on my experience, I don't think is yet established, but in some other countries of Southern Africa has established already. So these are some of the features that people actually look for when it comes to ornamental plants. Of course, there are other features. Some of them are not related with the capacity of the plants to become invasive, but this is like a generalization that I brought to you. Are we good? Any question from the students? Sorry.
No question yet.
Okay. So then another question that I also looked into in this research was like, how do people involved in this relation between the ornamental sector and plant invasions, how do they see and understand plant invasions coming from the sector? Sorry. So I talked to 3 stakeholder groups: environmental specialists, people working in the nurseries and the landscapers, and the public, people who have, gardens and spaces to grow plants in general, or even have pot plants. So I found that the understanding of plant invasions is very similar between stakeholders. There is, I don't know if Richard, you agree with me, but there's this thing of, from the scientist side of things, I think we tend to say that the public and the non-specialist groups lack of awareness, lack of knowledge, they have lack of everything. And so we tend to say that all the time. But actually, what I found here, like talking to people from these 3 countries, is that people actually, non-specialist groups, people just like, random people, not I'm not talking about scientists. They actually understand plant invasions and ecological processes, like plant spread, the fact that a plant spread, they understand it pretty well. It's just that they don't necessarily use the same terms, the scientific terms, to describe ecological processes. So I think, as John was saying in the last slide about the take home messages, more than lack of awareness or lack of understanding from the non-specialist groups, I think it's more a lack of communication and mutual understanding between the different stakeholders that are involved in a certain issue that then goes to managing biological invasions. And then perceptions of specific ornamental plants did vary depending on different interests. An example from Namibia, cacti. So we were talking before about cacti, I think one of the questions. So in Windhoek, the capital of Namibia, cacti, so there's this person who leads an initiative to clear cacti from Windhoek. So cacti in Namibia are quite invasive, and in South Africa as well. Some cacti are also invading Botswana, actually. There's this one called bunny ears cacti. It's very common in the area of Celebi Upique, that side. So yeah, like palapet, but more like Celebi piquesi. So again, back to Namibia. So Windhoek. So there's this person leading this initiative to clear cacti from Windhoek. It's a citizen initiative, and she was saying that the thickets, the bushes that the cacti form, they are spreading all over Windhoek, are used. These thickets are used by thieves to hide their tools and hide themselves, you know, in preparation to commit crimes. Now, funnily enough, interesting enough, actually, not funny, this same type of cacti or similar are used in northern Namibia to fence houses and actually protect properties from thieves. So with this example, I just want to highlight how, again, as Julie and John were saying, how context-specific biological invasions impact and perceptions of these invasions are, depending on where you are and depending on the people you're talking to. Again, you can see that these cacti, these invasions, are having straight opposite effects in different parts of Namibia, depending on who you are talking to. So, and again, I think this has to do with cultural and socioeconomic contexts and personal life experiences that are very different between people. Now, so considering that, and I'm actually finishing, I think, yeah, I don't want to go over time. How do we go about managing plant invasions? If, again, we are having all these like different perceptions and preferences. What do you think? Just one person, just say something, and then we will pick up on that. Yes. So how do we go about managing these plant invasions from the sector, right? Considering everything I've just said. So I think, and again, this is part of my interpretation of my research, I think that before going on to what to do exactly, we have to bear some factors in mind that are often kind of like neglected when it comes to biological invasions and when it comes to environmental issues. I think that there are things called products of history that have to do with the way people relate with plants and the way people relate to each other in order to manage or relate with the plants. I don't know if that makes sense. So in the case of Southern Africa, I'm talking about things like colonial and apartheid legacies. So as I said before, colonial legacies can be seen in the ornamental industry even till today, in the plants that we use, in the way many gardens are designed and all of that. Then colonial and apartheid legacies also come into the relationships between these different stakeholders. For example, this is a main factor behind the fact that the informal sector is mostly Black majorities and the formal sector is shared by white and Black majorities. It's also behind the fact that many of the best established and more formal and bigger nurseries are still owned by either white Southern Africans or expats. Also, power relations from the individual to the sub-regional level comes into play when we are talking about how to manage plant invasions from the sector. What I mean by power relations is, these relations of superiority or inferiority, depending on your class, your skin color, and all of that obviously has an impact on the way that we can get or not to mutual agreements between people from different ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, and skin colors, and obviously class as well. Then the human coevolution with plants also has to do with the way we relate with plants and the fact that, for example, in the case of the ornamental sector, as humans, we tend to favor specific features from the plants that are actually, some of them could be linked to their capacity to become invasive, like, for example, fast growth or beautiful flowers that that have long blossoms, for example, that has to do with their capacity to reproduce. And then the concept of human development is related in the way we build our, for example, urban areas, which is actually our habitat. You know, human habitats are usually urban areas. So the way we design a landscape, that's also, you know, related to the fact that we, in the case of Southern Africa, prefer certain plants over others. So again, these are factors just to think about and bear in mind when it comes to how to manage plant invasions from the sector. And my last slide, so I'm not going to talk to you guys more. So these are recommendations that I made from the research I did with one. And it's, again, related to what John was saying. John was saying that, you know, biological invasions are caused by humans, but it's something that humans can solve as well. But we need to then collaborate first, improve our collaboration between these stakeholders I was talking about, like, you know, the environmental scientists, the people working in the sector, in the industry, in the ornamental industry, and just the public, you know, just people that like plants and gardens. So we have to improve this collaboration and mutual understanding, so a better communication. But then, in doing so, we have to ensure pluralism, because we are talking about a rainbow subregion, Southern Africa, with many languages, many people from different cultural backgrounds, and we have to respect that, and we have to recognize and value some of these groups. Some of them have been marginalized. And in the case of the ornamental sector, for example, I'm talking about the informal sector. I think, and you might disagree, but I think that the informal sector has to be recognized and valued in order to manage plant invasions with their, you know, with their consent and their opinions being recognized. And of course, to do that, again, we have to address these power differences that come with class and skin color in Southern Africa. It's uncomfortable, but it happens, right? And also we have to address complex, you know, inferiority and superiority complexes, especially when it comes to countries. And, you know, that happens everywhere. In sub-regions, there's always one country that thinks is superior than the other, or vice versa, like one country that thinks is inferior. So all of that, we have to consider that and work towards the good, you know, the common good. And obviously, I'm an outsider. I'm not going to say who believes is superior than the other. This is not the space to say that. And then fourth, I think we need to seek alliances with existing sub-regional groups that are working in this interface between nature and society. And from the top of my head, I can think of, there is this Association of Environmental Education for Southern Africa. So they are Southern Africa in general. Obviously, there's more South Africans than any other country, but I think it's a good opportunity in the case of biological invasions to, you know, come together and try to manage and, you know, have an integrated governance to the issue. So yeah, that's all. Thank you very much, in Setswana.
As we have come to an end of our talk, I hope you have understood the impact of biological invasions. You have also known the pathways and management strategies. And you are able to say the role of ornamental plants trade. Lastly, you are able to develop solutions for sustainable invasive species management. On the 31st, we're going to have our third talk of our series. And I would like to welcome you all to join us. And the title of the talk will be Environmental Changes and its Impact on Freshwater Ecosystems in the Okavango Delta. And we will have three incredible speakers who are Professor Skelton, Professor Louisa Vaness, and Professor Albert. Thank you so much for joining today, and don't forget to follow us.